stunning looks, then swift.
The defending champions were jolted in an upset for the ages on Sunday. A new week of this World Cup begins with the most successful side in the history of the competition, looking to overcome what has been a jilted start for them. Welcome to Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricket for Matchday. Match number 14 of this World Cup sees Australia take on Sri Lanka, with both sides still searching for their first win of the competition. Giving us company for this Monday afternoon game, which comes from Lucknow, in our studio, we have Dasgupta. Deep, I was on a flight with you what seems like just 24 hours ago.
It was.
And from Ahmedabad, and yet so much has happened in this World Cup since.
Absolutely, what a game. Finally, a good game yesterday, a close game, and an upset. Yes,
and on our screens, as you'll find out soon, we've got Tom Moody and Farveez Maharoof. Tom, there'll be a lot I have to ask about Australia and what they feel on the inside, but surely seeing England stumble that way on a Sunday must be a mood lifter for several Aussies.
Oh, look, I'm so excited about this week after Sunday's episode. It's like the cloud cover is cleared over the whole of Australia and suddenly everything's okay.
Oh, how I've missed your company, Tom Moody. So good to be back here. Farveez, hello to you as well. When you look at when the sides who are perceived to be bottom half teams start tripping the ones at the top half, that's when World Cups start getting exciting. We all remember Sri Lanka versus England from 2019 and how that opened that tournament up. This Afghanistan win, all of a sudden, is a morale booster for all teams, including Sri Lanka?
Including Sri Lanka and Australia for a change as well. You mentioned about Australians being the most successful team. Unfortunately, they haven't started well. But for Sri Lanka, they will be wanting to get on board. Yes, they have scored more than 300 runs in both the games, but bowling have let them down. So hopefully this is a start in a new era of a new captaincy.
Yes, it is a big game. I know it's only the 14th game of a 45-match league stage, and yet you think that the side losing this, 3 wins to begin the tournament, will already start feeling the semi-final might be a bit way away. Before we start looking ahead, and there's a lot to look ahead to, let's look back. This Australia versus Sri Lanka is a rivalry in men's ODIs that has been dominated by Australia, especially at World Cups. But Farveez, if we look at the recent past, the most recent series happened last year in Sri Lanka. It was one with a lot of fanfare, with visuals that, you know, were just so heartwarming to see given everything that was going around Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka won that. What do you remember the most from that contest?
Yeah, that was an emotional series for many reasons, as you correctly said, with the country situation. And it was so nice of the Australian team to be in Sri Lanka at that time and played a series. And they won a lot of Sri Lankan hearts. I remember the last game, it was dedicated to Australia, and most of the fans, about 80% of the capacity, turned up in yellow. So, you know, it was a wonderful gesture, and Sri Lanka won that series 3-2. But the pitches were quite slow, and it was on the slower side. So I reckon at Lucknow it will be a different pitch, a different challenge for Sri Lanka. So it's about starting well. Both the teams are looking for the first 2 points. For Sri Lanka, if they could, do well in the first power play, whether they bat or bowl, I think they could, really surprise the Australian team.
Yes, and when you look at the history of these sides in the World Cup, it reads 8-1 in favour of Australia, and yet that 1 for Sri Lanka, arguably their greatest victory of all time in the 1996 final. But that's not the only times these teams have met in the final. They are, in fact, Australia and Sri Lanka are the only teams to have contested 2 men's ODI World Cup finals. And the 2007 game is the one we're looking back on before we look ahead, because both the gentlemen on our screens were there. Tom Moody was coach of that Sri Lankan side as they became that consistent force in ODI cricket, and a 22-year-old Farveez Maharoof, if I might add, was part of that squad, took 2 forfers earlier in the tournament. Tom, take us through that game. Obviously, the finish is not remembered very well, but what are your memories from Bridgetown in 2007?
I think the biggest memory is the pride in help guide a relatively young side into a World Cup final away from home was quite a significant thing for Sri Lanka. The disappointment of the final itself was, I suppose, the way the second half of it, particularly the second half of the second innings played out with the bad light and the weather conditions that we had. It didn't really feel like it finished on the note that it should have finished on. And I'm not talking about the result. I'm just talking about how, you know, it was nearly farcical how dark it was that we were playing in the last, I can't remember how many overs it was, but it seemed like for a long period of time it was even hard for the spectators to see what was going on out in the middle, let alone the cricketers.
Yeah, not the prettiest sight we've seen on a cricket field, let alone in a World Cup final. Farveez, take us through your memories of that, especially given how poignant a moment it was. This is what you would look at as the start of that period of 7-8 years where Sri Lanka pretty much made, you saw a tournament final and you saw Sri Lanka in it.
I think the progress happened in 2005 when Tom took over. That's where the team was built up for the 2007 World Cup up in West Indies, and that 3 years what Tom was with Sri Lanka, I think we reached many heights. We became the runners-up. We beat England in England 5-0, you know, so to speak. So loads of series was won. On that day, during the final, I was the 12th man carrying the waters, and we were gunned down by a particular brilliant innings by Adam Gilchrist to start with. And in the second half, as Tom correctly said, you know, we remember the final for wrong reasons with the bad light. You know, I think it started happening around the 22nd over, an amount of rain and a lot of chaos going on. You know, the authorities wanted to finish the final in a day. It's not the most prettiest or most memorable ones to hang out with, but definitely a lot of pride. A young team, as Tom said, myself included, you know, 2 months in Caribbean, did so well, and ended up in the losing side to a great Australian team.
Right. That's our look back done. It's time to now build ahead to this contest. The toss has just taken place. We know that Sri Lanka have won the toss. They will bat first. Team news will come shortly, but let's address the big topic for Sri Lanka, because you had someone new at the toss. We've known that Dasun Shanaka's tournament is over. Kusal Mendes takes over. Just to start things off, Deep, to lose your captain right in the middle of a World Cup, you've lost 2 matches. That sense of an unsettled environment, how much does that come into play?
I wouldn't say unsettled, because the team's kind of settled, but yes, it is a big blow, and it's so unfortunate. Before the World Cup started, you lost Hasaranga, you've lost Chamira, Lahiru Kumara, I don't know what's his fitness situation. So, especially the bowling, I mean, look at the Sri Lankan batting, it's really, really good, and they've been performing really well. It's their bowling which is a little inexperienced, and you're missing your big guns there. So, obviously, and on losing Shanaka, I think Shanaka obviously got that 5th in the first game, even though Sri Lanka lost. But I thought, over the years, of the last year or so, he's really led the side well.
Let's talk about Kusal Mendes, the captain, Farveez, because it is the first time he's leading Sri Lanka out in an international. But he has led in the LPL in the past. What kind of a captain is he, from whatever you've seen?
He's a quite aggressive character. That's what I've seen from his LPL experience, as well as captaining the domestic sides. He's totally different to Dasun Shanaka. Dasun Shanaka is a captain. He holds the cards to himself, doesn't show his emotions. But with Kusal, he will definitely let the players know. I mean, you would have seen in the field as well. As a wicketkeeper, he's always moving around the field, screaming at the players, moving around the field. So, he's someone that keeps busy. And I just hope that Kusal's era starts off with a positive note, because Kusal Mendes have been tipped to take over from Dasun Shanaka, whatever time it is going to be. But unfortunately, it happens in the middle of the tournament. So that's a big blow for Sri Lanka, because Dasun Shanaka, as Deep said correctly, have led Sri Lanka really well in the last couple of years and won some important games. But on a personal front, Dasun hasn't performed as a batsman. So this is where I think it's getting a bit trickier with who's going to replace him at number 7. I mean, Dasun Shanaka is a batsman who bowls a bit. The other choice is Chami Karunaratne, who's a bowling all-round who bats a bit. So it's an interesting transition is going to happen. So all in all, I think it's a big lose for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, Tom, just before we get to the team, just in terms of the onus on Kusal Mendes here, of course, as Farveez mentioned, he is touted as the next one. You'd have probably hoped for a easier teething period when he takes over the captaincy. But now let's look at this World Cup. He is the top performing batter, been in surreal form. He is the wicket keeper and now captain too. How easy or tough is it for Kusal Mendes to sustain that free-flowing batting we've seen, knowing that he's carrying that added burden of captaincy and a potentially depleted batting lineup?
Well, he's been in rare form and he's been a delight to watch, really. We've all known that he's been an exceptionally talented player, and at times there's been frustration over the early parts of his career that he hasn't realised that potential, but he's just starting to come into his own now. So to add another layer of responsibility, as you quite rightly point out, of that captaincy on top of the keeping and the batting is going to be his greatest challenge. Can he show the mental toughness to be able to still play the brand of cricket that he has done up to this point, that's given him the impact that he's had as the batter? Is he able to concentrate behind the stumps and isolate the role of thinking as a captain, but also making sure he's efficient behind the stumps? So there's many different parts to his roles now, and I'm sure that the coach Chris Silver would have sat with him along with a few other senior players around, making sure that he does switch off at the right times and switch on when it's most important.
Just to add quickly to that, because he's a wicket keeper, and I think as keeper you were kind of a leader anyways. You kind of, for me, is as a keeper you're the fielding captain. So I think comparatively it would be easier for him to kind of ease into that position as well as a captain.
Right. Lots of roles and responsibilities for Kusal Mendes to carry out. The first of the tasks he's done well. 2 changes for Sri Lanka, and he named both of them right. Not always do captains get that right, or tosses. And there they are. We can confirm, we obviously knew Dasun Shanaka's tournament is over. Matisha Pathirana too had a shoulder injury. He misses out. The ones coming in, Shamika Karunaratne, who was drafted into the squad, having been with them already as a travelling reserve. And also in comes Lahiru Kumara. So let's go straight to Farveez with the changes. You can see the balance and the mix. What do you make of it, Farveez?
Balance remains the same. 4 batters, 2 all-rounders and 3 bowlers. Chamik Karunaratne, we knew that he's going to replace Dasun Shanaka, like to like, almost. Whether it's going to be Lahiru Kumara or Kasun Raditha was the big debate that it happened in Sri Lanka. And the think tank went to Lahiru Kumara. And personally, I would have gone to a player who has played before and brings that nagging length and line against a moving ball in Kasun Raditha. That would be my preference. But for some reason, Lahiru Kumar has been picked. You just have to back the boy, because he has also coming back after injury. We saw him during the 2 practice matches. He didn't hit his straps at that time, but I'm pretty sure the workload during the practice sessions he would have up the ante, and he's up. So huge opportunity for Lahiru Kumar and Chamik Karunaratne, as well as the top order of Sri Lanka. They are batting in the afternoon. There won't be much swing and seam. Best to bat in the afternoon and try and get a decent score in, and try and defend against a struggling Australian side.
Farveez, quickly, is it because the Pathirana is predominantly looked as a middle over bowler and a death over bowler, and I guess Lahiru would be better suited for that role as compared to Rajitha?
I think Kasun Raditha, if he was playing, he will definitely take the new ball and bowl in the power play. And that's the challenge going to be for Lahiru Kumar, being the leading bowler. Dilshan Marusanga will bowl with the new ball. And Dilshan, along with in the evenings under lights, I would like to see Lahiru Kumar with the new ball, because he can seam the ball bowling at 140 clicks. And, with the struggling batting side of Australia, that's not a bad option to take. The safe option would be to bowl Mahesh Theekshana, steadier, trying to bowl more dot balls. But I like to be a little bit aggressive in bringing Lahiru Kumar with the new ball, at least for 2-3 overs to start with, see if there's any movement. But as you correctly said, Dilshan's role has to be done by Lahiru Kumar now. Coming in the middle, try and be aggressive, pick up wickets, and if needed, bowl in the death overs as well.
Yes, it will be interesting to see how Sri Lanka go about managing their bowling. They have conceded nearly 8 per over in the 2 games they've played, which is why, despite 300 plus scores while batting, they have not been able to win once. But it's Australia who will bowl first. And Tom, I want to come to you with this. The last 5 times Australia have bowled first, they have conceded 300 plus on each occasion. An economy rate above 6 this year. I know you've attributed it to a bunch of factors after the South Africa game. But if we break it down for the quicks, how much of it comes down to just the sheer workload to that pace trio?
I think there's no doubt that the Australian team at the moment, and this isn't an excuse by any means, but they do boast a team that has players that are all three format players. And over the last 12 months, the schedule for Australia has been a very, very hectic schedule. So your likes of your Pat Cummins and your Hazelwoods and your Starks of the world have been up and running for a long period of time. But I'd hate to sort of point to that as an excuse, because I'm sure there's plenty of other bowlers and plenty of other teams that have had the same sort of issues. Well, that graphic there sort of demonstrates the point I'm making. And I just sense, particularly the man at the top of the list and in picture, Pat Cummins, to me, there's two issues. One is that I think he has carried an enormous amount of workload over the last 12 months and responsibility of captaincy, and he's had his injury problems, and he's also played very little ODI cricket. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you know, it's just another form of the game, it's another over he needs to bowl, surely he can make the adjustments. But the subtleties between T20 cricket, 50-over cricket and Test cricket are quite significant with the way you bowl and the way that you prepare for those different formats. And I think Pat Cummins has come into this World Cup underdone as a 50-over bowler, and I think he is finding it difficult to get his rhythm and find his feet in this format, and at the moment he's not having the impact that we'd expect a bowler of his calibre to have.
Yes, and just to back Tom's point up, 11 members of this Australian World Cup squad were in England for the World Test Championship final and for the Ashes. 7 of them were also part of the IPL, and here they find themselves in a World Cup in India. I think Cam Green has spent just 2 weeks this year at home since boarding the flight to India before the Border Gavaskar Trophy. You have to feel for the bowling, but there's not too much time just to empathize. How do they work better on this Lucknow surface bowling first?
I think I was pleasantly surprised to see that Lucknow surface last game. I thought it was very sporting. It had bit for everyone. Good carry, good pace, there was turn. So I think that should help the bowlers a bit. But I think the other important thing for me is all three of them are new ball bowlers. You look at Hazelwood, Stark and Pat Cummins, and they kind of, their strength is with the new ball. Stark obviously can bowl in the later half of the innings as well. And also a form of Zampa to a certain extent, you know, those middle overs, you know, you're not picking wickets and stuff like that. His form, you know, in the last few games, it's not just this World Cup actually, you add another 4 or 5 games before that, he's been in wicketless in quite a few games. So I think it's a mixture of a few things. But you know what, my observation based on last game, 7 drop catches. When was the last time you saw Australia drop 7 catches, or even half of that? So, I mean, that's a bit of a concern because, I mean, it's a gun fielding side. So that's more of a concern than anything else as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they do have the least or the worst catching efficiency in ODIs this year, which is just something I think very few of us would have ever been able to attribute to an Australian team in any format of cricket. But Tom, just a word on the bowling. Adam Zampa in that first game in Lucknow didn't have the best of times. Aaron Finch has mentioned on our shows that he is working through a hip issue. How much of that is affecting Zampa's bowling, and is him returning to form and making the most of this Lucknow surface the most vital ingredient for Australia's bowling effort to turn around?
It's one of many ingredients that Australia need to get right, I think, to turn their campaign around. There's no question Zampa is a very important part of the Australian bowling attack, and you know his figures in ODI cricket over the last 2 to 3 years, you know, show that he is leading in this format of the game out of all the spinners in world cricket. So Zampa's form is critical. We need him to get back to that miserly, penetrating style that he has in those middle overs. If you've got a hip injury, if you're a spin bowler or a pace bowler, that's going to have a significant issue with regards to how you're trying to get through the crease, because your spinners and pace bowlers drive through the crease with their hips and the rotation of their hips. So, you know, that is clearly having some sort of effect. And Finchy would know, because Finchy knows, obviously, Adam Zampa and that team very, very well, given he's only just recently retired. So that's good intel from Finchy. You know, I just want to touch a little bit on those drop catches. And I think the drop catches is also attributed to concentration. To me, you don't suddenly lose a skill. Australia's always been a very proud fielding side and a very good fielding side, so they've got the skill. So it's purely down to concentration, and therefore, why isn't it they have got the same sort of focus and concentration? Is it fatigue? Is it, you know, maybe they're looking something beyond what's right in front of them? And that's something that I'm sure they would have talked about in between the last game and today's match.
And, you know, just to emphasize on that fielding point, why I think it's important for me is that's the only thing, that's the only skill that you do as a team. You bat kind of on your own, you get your throwdowns and everything else, you bowl in the nets, but fielding is one thing that you do it together. And how I see it, if the team's not fielding well, then there is something that you need to address in that dressing room, and that's how I see it.
Right. Let's focus on the Sri Lankan batting now, shall we? They have had a good start to the tournament, 300 plus in both games. But Farveez, we've spoken about how the bowling mix changes with the changes we've seen. On the batting, with Chamika Karunaratne replacing Dasun Shanaka, given the kind of form Dhananjay De Silva has had, and we have spoken through the Asia Cup and now through this World Cup of his slightly diminished returns with the bat, is that too much pressure you're looking at the top 5 to deliver?
I think if Sri Lanka to win this game, at least a couple of the players in the top 5 got to make big runs if they have any chance of beating this team. And number 6, number 7 in the recent past has been an issue with Dhananjay and Dasun have not hit the straps what they used to before, especially Dhananjay De Silva. But he's a player full of class, and he will like the bowling attack of Australia with full of fast bowlers, because he's a player who's very good against fast bowlers. He has plenty of time. And I just hope that Dhananjay De Silva comes good at number 6. Charit Tasalanka has had a lean series as well at number 5. He's somebody that the last 1.5 years have decently well for Sri Lanka. So I think 4, 5, 6, Sadira Samarawickrama, he's been batting superbly. Charit and Dhananjay De Silva will have a big game today if Sri Lanka to have any chance, because the way Kusal Mendis and Kusal Janit plays, it's you can get a day where they can get out cheaply, and that's where the pressure will mount on number 5 and 6. And the players at 5 and 6 got to be able to suck up that pressure and try and get a decent score, because number 7 most probably Dunit Velalagi will get probably a promotion, and Karunaratne will be at number 8 as a finisher. So I just hope that Sri Lanka gets a good chance, and Kusal Janit Pereira, who has had a lean series so far, comes good as well. And Kusal Mendis, the batsman, Kusal Mendis plays the natural game, not changing anything, having that captaincy burden. Just go out there and be aggressive as possible. That's where Kusal Mendis and Kusal Janit Pereira are good at, as always.
Yeah, I do want to spend a minute on Kusal Pereira, but before that, if it is with what Farveez suggests, Vellalag at 7, Chamika Karunaratne at 8, we saw a bit of Vellalag, what he can do with the bat in the Asia Cup. So added impetus on him. He's had a quiet start to his World Cup life.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is, but also he's a young lad. He's what, 20. So you still want him to enjoy himself. It's his first World Cup. Let him be as he is. But yes, a lot would depend on the first 3, I mean the top 3, and especially Sadira, because I think he's batting really, really well, especially against spin, and obviously fast bowling, but especially against spin. And when I look at this Australian side, I said, you know what, you see through the first spell of Pat Cummins, Stark and Hazelwood, and in the middle overs, you will have opportunities provided Zampa doesn't come back into form and the way he's bowling. So you're going to, that's how I believe Sri Lanka should approach. Just see through, make sure you see through the first spell, and then you have the middle overs and the end.
Tom, at the top of the order for Sri Lanka, you've got Kusal Pereira, who, no questioning the ability, especially to just go slam bang at the top, but there are just no runs. He replaced Dimuth Karunaratne in the middle of the Asia Cup. 4 games since haven't yielded much. If you were in the Sri Lanka camp, would you have maybe preferred the safety or just the assuredness that a Karunaratne might have brought against this Australian attack?
No, I would have backed Pereira purely because of experience. This will be probably his last World Cup. And, players like him run hot and cold. And when they run hot, they're very, very dangerous. And particularly with the Australian attack, the extra pace on the ball, I think he'll enjoy that, particularly square of the wicket with his shots behind point and in front of point, and also on the leg side with those pulls and flicks through the leg side. So he's a type of player I think the Australians will look at as a potential threat. They won't be looking at what he's done in the last 4 or 5 games because that's not really that important, particularly if a player of experience. You know that he's going to turn up and be unpredictable, and that's, I suppose, one of the beauties of him. Sri Lanka will be dearly hoping that's positive side of what he brings to the table will turn up tonight.
Just trying to preempt the second part of this game. Obviously, we'll get to talk about it at length after we see how it plays out. But from what we saw in Lucknow the first time around in Australia, South Africa, it did get, the wicket did seem a bit spicier in the second half.
That's right.
Did a lot for the seamers, and spin played its part as well. Given the form this Australian batting lineup is in, bowled out for less than 200 both times, you'd imagine this was a game where they would have preferred to bat first?
Yes, it also boils down to, I guess, how much dew there is and a given night. Last time around, there wasn't much dew, so obviously that helped the bowling side. But generally speaking, what I gather is there isn't too much dew. Even if it does form, it's around 8:30, so might affect the last 15 odd overs. But yeah, I mean, when the other important thing is when I guess both the teams are looking to open their account. So this is a very high pressure game. So you'd rather bat first, put up a good total, and and post that scoreboard threat or scoreboard pressure on the opposition.
When they do come out to bat, Tom, Stephen Smith, how key? I've spoken of Adam Zampa from the first innings. You'd imagine someone like Stephen Smith, as long as Australia can keep the target within reach, him dropping anchor, consolidating through the innings, that becomes one of the important things to fall in place for Australia?
Well, to be honest with you, Yash, it'd be the last thing I'd be saying to Marnus Labuschagne or Steve Smith is using the word drop anchor or, be the backbone of the innings, because I would want them to find their top gear. Their top gear may not be the same gear that a David Warner might have or a Glenn Maxwell might have, but I would want them to be playing at their maximum top gear and play with the freedom, knowing that they've got the backing of the dressing room to go out there and express themselves. We've seen both Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith in particular of recent times in shorter form cricket, in 20 over cricket, and at times in 50 over cricket, go at a decent rate. I'd be encouraging him to go out there and just trust himself, back himself. He's a world-class player, and sometimes players like Steve Smith can overthink the game, even though that he has that sort of genius streak in him. And I'd be just trying to sort of simplify the game for him as much as possible, see ball, hit ball, and take the game on.
Farveez, on the evidence of that previous game in Lucknow, Australia versus South Africa, and how it played out, what would be the sort of template Sri Lanka looking at for this game as a whole, now that they are batting first?
I think try and get a decent score up to 300. That is very important. The pitch looked really good. The red soil, which was played in the last game, not sure whether it's going to be the same soil or not. But if it's a red soil, I think it will have a decent bounce. That's why I said, I would be very tempted to give the new ball to Lairu Kumar along with Dilshad Maduska, just to see whether there will be any movement. And you always can fall back to Mahesh Theekshana to come back and put runs, hold on the runs as well. So it's all about starting well. The two Kusal, if they get going against the quality of pace attack of Australia, they like the ball coming into the bat. I think they could, seriously damage this Australian team. And also, this is the best time to play Australia. I mean, take man to man, I think Australians are up there as favourites for me because of the experience and the number of games they've played in India. They know the conditions really well. But if you ask me, it's the best time to play Australia. If Sri Lanka can start well in the first 10 overs, I think the result can be in a positive way by the end of the game.
Tom, do you agree with the words of your former ward? Is it the best time to play Australia for Sri Lanka?
Yeah, look, I think Australia, you look at their recent ODI form, it's pretty horrific. I think it's something like they've won one in the last 8 matches or something,
Yeah.
which is not great reading if you're an Australian player or an Australian fan. So clearly it's a format that they have lost their way, haven't got any sort of momentum like some other teams in this World Cup have got. So they need to, arrest that slide and change their mindset and start believing that this is a format they can dominate again, because it's a format they have dominated for a long period of time. And I just feel that they've just lost their way at the current moment. I'm not saying it's going to remain that way, because we know how quickly things can turn around.
It can confirm to all of you that this is the same wicket that was used when Australia played South Africa, the game where South Africa scored 311 and won quite comfortably. What does that then make your assessment of what is a good score batting first, Deep?
I think 280. 280, I mean 300, yes, but I think 280 is something that you should be looking forward to. And then obviously you assess. If you're in a good position, then you go for a 300. But I think to start off with, I think 280 is what you're looking at.
Okay, so done with what should be a good total, what we can expect. But let's, how do we end without putting you all on the spot? Let's start with you, Farveez. Sri Lanka batting first. Give me your prediction.
I think if Sri Lanka starts well in the first 10 overs, they will end up probably between 280 and 290.
Okay, Tom?
241.
Oof.
241,
Love it, love it. Love the specificity, Tom. Never missed it. All right, Deep. Over to you.
I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with, let's say, 270.
Okay, got a
somewhere
bit
in between.
If I could just add that the reason I've gone reasonably low is because I felt that game against South Africa, Australia allowed South Africa probably 50 more than what they should have got, and I think they ended up with 311. So that brings it back to 260. So then I'm just taking off roughly 20 runs just to bring it back to what I think Sri Lanka will score.
So who's getting those 20 runs down for you?
Who's going to get them for us?
No. Which bowler will get those 20 runs down from 260 to 240?
There's not going to be one bowler that's going to do it. We just might hold on to a catch or two.
That would be a welcome change for Australia. All right. Got a good range. 240 says Tom Moody, 280, 290 Farveez Maharoof.
241.
241. Apologies, says Tom Moody. 280 to 290 from Farveez and Deep right in the middle, as the neutral should be. So I will see which one of you comes closest. We will be back whenever this innings is done. Be sure to join us then. In the meantime, do be sure to check out the ESPN Cricinfo mobile app, which will have you covered through this innings and whatever unfolds as it goes along. That's it then from us for now. Be sure to join us as soon as the Sri Lankan innings is done on Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricinfo Matchday.
Stunning looks, then swift,